Wow, what an incredible season, and what an incredible way to wrap up a series. In this time of uncertainty and botched series finales, it's honestly incredibly refreshing to see a series actually land the plane in a fairly satisfying manner. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. This time around, I'm just going to tell you all about the plot, so spoiler warning ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Arden XIII. Welcome to your Too Long Didn't Watch for Castlevania Season 4 and the series finale. The plot of Season 4 picks up after the plot of Season 3, where 6 weeks have passed and we are shown exactly what Trevor and Sypha have been getting up to over the course of these 6 weeks. The two of them have been traveling all throughout the countryside of Wallachia, fighting off and defeating lingering packs of night creatures who are still wreaking havoc on the poor people. During their travels, they uncover a plot to resurrect Dracula again. For those of you who do not know and were unfamiliar going into Season 4, resurrecting Dracula, or creating a surrogate of Dracula, or being a reincarnation of Dracula after his demise in Castlevania 2, is more or less the plot of the entirety of the Castlevania franchise. So this is nothing new that we're being introduced to. Over the course of their trial-ridden journey, the pair arrive in Targovishta, the city that Dracula absolutely devastated in Season 1 with his initial declaration of war. The two of them realize in short order that something is rotten in the state of Wallachia within the city of Targovishta as a whole, and resolve to investigate it further. It is also here that we are introduced to an antagonistic duo in the form of a Russian vampire named Drago and Varney of London. Through some investigating, the two realize that the royal family is apparently still alive, somehow, and are being sequestered away in an elusive underground court, kept safe by a sworn sword, clearly deranged, named Zamfir. Through some prodding, the two of them are granted an audience with the underground court. Finally. Meanwhile, Alucard is broken out of his self-imposed depression by answering a call for help from a nearby village that is being constantly raided by night creatures. It is so good to see Alucard actually clean himself up and do what he does best. After an epic confrontation in resolving the raid of the night creatures, Alucard is introduced to the town leader, a strong-witted and clever realist named Greta. It is also here that Alucard is introduced to Saint Germain, whom apparently has escaped the Infinite Corridor and is notably absent in Lover. But it doesn't take too very long for us to find out what exactly happened to Saint Germain, as we are gifted a gracious amount of montage scenes depicting what exactly happened to Saint Germain after the conclusion of Season 3 and over the course of the past 6 weeks. Apparently, Saint Germain has been getting up to some real nefarious shenanigans. Ultimately, he intends to complete the rebus, the great work of alchemy. By doing so, he will be able to control the Infinite Corridor, but in order to do so, he must rip Vlad Dracula and Lisa Tepish out of hell and place them into a singular alchemical body with which he can draw power from. It turns out that he is the one behind all of the raids on these villages, thus pushing all of the refugees to one location so that he can slyly manipulate Alucard and Greta into sequestering everyone into a safer location where he could potentially get up to his nefarious plot and resurrect Dracula on the place that he died. Maybe a large castle in the middle of nowhere? Honestly, it doesn't take too much convincing for Alucard to resolve himself and say, yeah, we should probably move to a safer location, the castle seems fine, and ferry everyone there over the course of a couple kind of scary nights. Meanwhile, in Styria, Isaac and Hector settle their arc in one of the most epic and touching ways that I've ever seen put to animation. After rebuilding the city that he took last season, Isaac launches a full-blown assault on Castle Styria with a brand new fleet of night creatures that he has been grooming and cultivating over the past 6 weeks. This comes so quickly after Hector is able to recreate his Forge Master's hammer and pump out a fleet of night creatures for the Styrian military, and after he is able to plant a number of sabotagey, bomby sort of situations all over Castle Styria, and after Carmilla basically spirals out of control and becomes the very thing that she hates, And after the absolute chad of a vampire warrior that is Styria donning her daylight armor, this is so cool! The Styria plot is one of the coolest plots in the entirety of Season 4. It's incredibly short, but in this plot, it really shines. The sacking of Castle Styria is one of the most epic things that I've ever seen put to animation. From Isaac's vanguard, to Hector's failsafes, to the Forge Master's reconciliation, to Carmilla's ambitions blowing up in her face, to her final demise at her own hands, to rebuke the future of terrible horror that would befall them on the parts of Isaac, Hector, Styria, and Marana in favor of a future that is more bright and fulfilling to them, is just fucking beautiful. The line of Isaac saying, "I choose to live," strikes the deepest chord. Around this time is where the Styria plot really kind of ends, but I will get to the full ending here towards the end of this video. This show, this season, gives Return of the King a run for its money. But what is our intrepid trio up to these days? Well, Alucard was able to ferry the refugees from the town Dynasty to his castle, but they don't really get to hang out very long before they are attacked by a horde of vampires with fell creatures. The battle is really one-sided, and though Alucard is able to hold his own, the refugees really aren't. And they only really get to catch their breath when they are able to lock themselves behind the doors of Castle Dracula. Unfortunately, those defenses don't really hold too terribly long before the vampires break through, and that turns into a war in the foyer. We've seen this before in Season 2. But things aren't really going too terribly well for Trevor and Sypha either. They're introduced to the underground court, which is a veritable treasure trove underneath the city, in this Hunchback of Notre Dame, Court of Miracles kind of aesthetic. Zamfir is actually insane. The royal family are corpses, ornamented corpses. The people down here are losing their minds. Varney and Drago attack after having a pissing match about which one of the two of them is more of a vampire than the other one. But like I said, Varney and Drago attack the underground court, but Varney doesn't seem too preoccupied by the humans that are there or the treasure that's there. He's looking for one thing and one thing only. Another one of those transmission mirrors that has been popping up ever since last season, more and more. As Trevor and Sypha are able to beat Drago, Varney utilizes the mirror, which he found behind the royal corpses, to transport himself to the room in Castle Dracula where Saint Germain is conducting the ritual to bring Dracula and Lisa out of hell by using all of the souls sacrificed in the carnage downstairs as a catalyst to open the infinite corridor and call them back into the Rebus. But just as all hope seems lost for the refugees at Castle Dracula, Trevor and Sypha also step through the transmission mirror, joining Alucard in the foyer, and the three heroes are once again together to kick ass and take names. And my God, do they beat that ass! The hero shot here is one of the coolest things. Alucard is stabbing people with his flying sword and using a shield. Trevor is whipping the crap out of vampires. And I gotta give a special shout out to my girl Sypha for her Crown of Stars fucking dual-wielding elemental head-ass bullshit. Woo! My girl! That's the one. After clearing out all of the vampires and all the invaders and making sure that the refugees are in some manner relatively safe, the three of them decide that they need to go stop Saint Germain and the ritual that he is performing up on the top floor. But before they get there, Varney of London reveals that he is not actually Varney of London, but instead is actually Death. Death. The dude Death. The primordial elemental being that feeds off of death. Which is an incredible payoff for that conversation between Varney and Drago earlier in the season. Turns out Death has been manipulating Saint Germain for quite a while now, trying to get him to resurrect Vlad and Lisa so that Vlad will unleash the havoc and the hell and the hatred and the death that he intended to with his initial attack. This is something that Death wants because, again, Death feeds off of death, so he would be fat and full for eons to come. With Death standing at his back and really feeling like he's cornered otherwise, Germain completes the ritual and creates the Rebus, pulling Vlad and Lisa out of hell into this alchemical being, right in front of Alucard. That's great for the therapists. But all too late does Germain realize the folly of his ways and attempts to stall death while Trevor destroys the Rebus using the fancy new weapon that he managed to pick up. In the aftermath of the explosion, turns out Germain was impaled by the weapon, so he's probably not going to make it. And in one final saddening moment, he sees the love of his life, the person he lost in the infinite corridor, turn away from him as the corridor closes behind her. Enraged by his own failure, or the failure of his pawns, Death consumes the souls, the lingering souls of the dead from within the castle and without, assuming this horrifying yet badass final form, leading to the final confrontation where Trevor squares up to Death! Just before, however, he does tell Sypha that he loves her and asks her, pleads with her, not really pleads with her, just kind of says, hey, don't name the kid Trey4, which is like a payoff I didn't really think I needed, but at the same time was very cute. What follows is a confrontation of the epicest of proportions. In short, Trevor has to sacrifice himself by utilizing a dagger and a stone that he managed to pick up by sifting through the debris of earlier episodes to kill Death. In the wake of Death's demise, Alucard and Greta resolve to create a new settlement, a new town, a new village in the shadow of the Belmont Hold and Castle Dracula. Sypha does mourn Trevor's death, but is convinced and compelled by Alucard to stay with the new town and help in rebuilding its organization. But as the two heroes resolve to move on towards a brighter future, the two of them spy a familiar horse approaching them with a shrouded rider. In a wild twist, Trevor is still alive. He reveals that somehow, with the last bit of his strength, Germain managed to open the infinite corridor, sending Trevor away in the midst of the explosion, thus sparing his life. There are a number of tears, some witty banter is exchanged, Trevor asks for somebody to kill him towards the end of it, but the three share a wonderful moment, resolving to move forward. Meanwhile, wrapping up in Styria, Lenore decides that she no longer wants to be a slave to herself or anybody else and watches the sun rise. Hector really just can't have shit, bringing a conclusion to all the trials and tribulations that our various heroes and anti-heroes have suffered up until this point. But wait, there's more! I told you this gives Return of the King run for its money. In a surprise, shocking post-credits twist, Vlad and Lisa somehow survived, but have resolved to not interfere with Alucard's life for the time being, and instead will seclude themselves in a remote London town where they will live out the rest of their lives together. Very cute. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Castlevania Season 4 and the series as a whole ends. Now, in the interest of not making this a 20-minute long video or more, I'm going to cut it off here and save all of my analytics for a following video where I break down all of my praises and criticisms for Castlevania as a series and Castlevania Season 4. Overall, I really enjoyed the series, and I'm sad to see the season end, but with everything else that Netflix has been doing with many of their series, I'm happy to have a short, strong plot as opposed to a weak, long, or waning plot. That's all I've got. I've been Arden XIII. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked today's video, please feel free to interact with all the buttons down there, and if you feel like supporting us, you can hit us up on Patreon. Either one of those options will get you a spot at the lunch table, and we would love to have you. I am still waiting on that ramen, and I will catch you guys in the next one.